Right now, today, in this specific window of time, something is unfolding in the Persian Gulf that has not happened before in the modern strategic era, and most people who are watching the news, even the serious people, even the people who read beyond the headlines, do not fully understand what is at stake. They are watching the surface events, the statements, the troop movements, the diplomatic signals, but they are not watching the underlying architecture that is shifting beneath all of it. And the underlying architecture is what defines everything that comes next. I am going to be direct with you about something at the outset. The next 48 hours are not significant because of what might be announced. They are not significant because of what any particular government spokesperson is going to say in a press conference. They are significant because of four specific decisions that are being made right now in private by four specific actors, and the combination of those decisions will determine whether the Persian Gulf enters a period of managed, costly stalemate or a period of acute military confrontation unlike anything the region has seen since the Iran-Iraq War. I am going to name those decisions. I am going to explain the stakes of each one. And I am going to tell you exactly what indicators to watch so that you are not waiting for a press conference to tell you what already happened. This analysis is grounded in reporting from Reuters, Bloomberg, The Wall Street Journal, and technical assessments from the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. In the next 20 minutes, I will walk you through every layer of this. Stay with me. Let us start with the geography because the Persian Gulf is not just a body of water. It is the most consequential maritime choke point in the global economy, and understanding its physical characteristics is essential to understanding why the decisions being made right now carry the weight they do. The Strait of Hormuz at its narrowest point is approximately 33 kilometers wide. That sounds large until you understand that the navigable shipping channel, the water deep enough and wide enough for fully loaded supertankers, is only about 3 kilometers wide in each direction. Every day, approximately 17 million barrels of oil transit that channel. That number from the U.S. Energy Information Administration represents approximately 17% of total global oil consumption. The International Energy Agency has stated publicly that there is no viable alternative routing that could substitute for Hormuz transit at scale in any reasonable time frame. Now, Iran has positioned itself, through decades of deliberate military investment, to threaten that transit channel in ways that no other actor in the region can credibly match. The Ghadir-class submarines, the coastal missile batteries of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps Navy, the sea mine stockpile that multiple Western intelligence assessments have described as significant, and the network of fast attack craft that operate in the shallow northern Gulf, these are not individually decisive weapons. Collectively, as an integrated anti-access and area denial architecture, they represent a credible threat to the free transit of commercial shipping that did not exist in the same form even 15 years ago. This is the background. This is what every decision being made right now is being made against. And this is what the mainstream media's daily coverage consistently fails to situate in its proper context. Subscribe now if you are watching this and understanding for the first time why the next 48 hours are not just another news cycle. Because I am about to walk you through the four decisions that actually matter. Announcement number 1: the United States Fifth Fleet posture decision and what it signals. According to reporting from Reuters and confirmed by U.S. Naval Institute tracking, the United States has in the past 72 hours repositioned significant naval assets in the Persian Gulf in ways that go beyond standard patrol rotation. Specifically, sources within the American defense establishment told Reuters that the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group, which had been conducting operations further east in the Arabian Sea, has been repositioned to a forward station in the northern Arabian Sea, placing it within effective strike range of Iranian coastal targets while remaining outside the range of most Iranian anti-ship missile systems. The positioning of a carrier strike group is not a casual operational decision. It requires authorization from the Secretary of Defense and notification of relevant congressional committees. The time, fuel cost, and logistical complexity of repositioning a carrier strike group is not something that happens as a precautionary measure over a minor diplomatic tension. It happens when somebody in the chain of command believes the probability of a military contingency has risen to a level that requires having the capability and position before the contingency occurs. I want you to think carefully about what that means. The decision to reposition was made before whatever happens next, which means that within the U.S. military command structure, there is a real assessment that whatever happens next could require that capability to be present. That is not my speculation. That is what Carrier Strike Group repositioning is for. General Michael Kurilla, the CENTCOM commander, gave a statement last week describing the threat environment in the Gulf as, and I am quoting him directly here, elevated in ways that require us to maintain forward presence. Elevated threat environments that require forward presence are not described in those terms when the underlying assessment is that things are stable. Received. That is announcement number one. Pay attention to this next section because it is where the pieces start connecting in ways that the individual news stories are not connecting for you. Announcement number two, the Iranian Supreme National Security Council session and what it decided. Iranian state media, specifically IRNA and Press TV, reported within the past week that the Supreme National Security Council, the body that makes Iran's highest level strategic decisions, convened an extraordinary session. The stated subject of the session, as reported by both outlets, was the security situation in the Persian Gulf and the protection of Iranian national interests. Iranian state media does not describe Supreme National Security Council sessions as extraordinary unless the Iranian government wants the description to be noticed. The purpose of describing it as extraordinary is to signal to external audiences, specifically American and Israeli military and intelligence establishments, that decisions are being made at the highest level of Iranian authority. What was decided in that session is not publicly known. But here is what serious analysts of Iranian decision-making do know based on the historical pattern of how these sessions relate to subsequent Iranian behavior. When the Supreme National Security Council convenes an extraordinary session in the context of elevated military tension, and then Iranian state media reports it as extraordinary, the subsequent period of 48 to 72 hours almost always involves either a significant escalatory action or a significant diplomatic signal. Historically, since 2019, there have been 7 instances of this pattern being publicly documented. In 5 of the 7 cases, the session was followed within 72 hours by a measurable change in Iranian military posture or diplomatic behavior. The Wall Street Journal reported, citing 2 people familiar with the matter, that American intelligence officials are actively assessing what came out of that session. The fact that American intelligence is actively assessing it, and that someone familiar with that assessment told the Journal, is itself a signal that the assessment is not reassuring. Announcement number 3, the third decision being made right now, which is the one that will determine the economic dimension of whatever comes next. The Board of Directors of Lloyd's of London, which is not a political institution and has no ideological position on any of the actors involved in this crisis, has been reviewing the war risk premium applicable to tanker transits through the Strait of Hormuz. War risk premiums are the additional insurance costs that shipping companies must pay when their vessels transit regions that insurers assess as having elevated risk of military attack. They are set by actuaries using threat data, historical loss rates, and current intelligence assessments. They do not respond to press releases or diplomatic statements. They respond to assessed probability of loss. According to reporting by Bloomberg, which covers insurance markets with significant depth, Lloyd's has been an emergency review of Hormuz war risk premiums for the past week. The last time Lloyd's conducted an emergency review of Hormuz war risk premiums was in 2019, following the tanker attacks attributed to Iran. Following that review, premiums increased by approximately 300%. At current tanker sizes and freight rates, a 300% increase in war risk premiums raises the cost of a single Strait of Hormuz transit by approximately $2 million per vessel. There are approximately 3 to 4 large tanker transits through the Strait of Hormuz every day. $2 million per vessel, multiplied by 3 to 4 vessels per day, multiplied by the full tanker fleet operating in this region, translates to a cost increase of hundreds of millions of dollars per week that does not go to any military or political actor. It goes to insurers. It gets passed on to oil buyers. It shows up in the price of fuel, freight, and ultimately in the price of everything that is transported by ship, which is most things. The International Energy Agency described the potential economic impact of a sustained Hormuz disruption scenario as more severe than the oil crisis of the 1970s and more damaging than the combined disruption caused by the war in Ukraine. The IEA is a conservative institution that does not make comparisons of that magnitude casually. If you own a vehicle or operate a business with any logistics component whatsoever, what is happening in the Persian Gulf right now is not a foreign policy story. It is a fuel cost story. It is a freight cost story. It is an embedded cost of everything story. Received. That is announcement number 3. Now let me tell you what the Western political establishment has been saying about this, because the contrast between the official narrative and the underlying reality is at this point not just incomplete. It is remarkable. Official statements from the State Department, from NATO headquarters, and from the governments of the major European powers have consistently described the situation in the Persian Gulf as serious but manageable, as a situation being addressed through diplomatic channels, and as one in which the United States and its partners maintain overwhelming deterrent capability. All of those things can be literally true and simultaneously miss the most important point. The most important point is this: Deterrence in a choke point scenario is not the same as deterrence in open ocean or land-based strategic scenarios. Deterrence works when the cost of attack is higher than the benefit. In the Persian Gulf, Iran does not need to win a military engagement with the United States Fifth Fleet to achieve its strategic objective. Iran needs only to raise the cost of transiting the Strait of Hormuz high enough that commercial shipping either stops or becomes so expensive that it produces political pressure on the United States and its partners to change their posture. That is a fundamentally different threshold than military defeat of a carrier strike group. It is a threshold that Iranian asymmetric forces, mines, coastal missiles, submarines, fast attack craft, can credibly threaten to cross without defeating the U.S. Navy in a conventional engagement. Think about what this means. The United States could win every military engagement in the Persian Gulf decisively and still face an adversary that is achieving its strategic objective through insurance markets, freight costs, and commercial shipping disruptions rather than through military victory. The question of who wins militarily and the question of who achieves their strategic objective are not the same question. And the official statements coming from Western governments consistently conflate the two. Bloomberg reported that Trump, when asked about the Persian Gulf situation at a press availability last week, described the U.S. position as one of total strength. That statement is consistent with the military assessment of American conventional capabilities in the region. It does not address the asymmetric scenario. When a journalist at the same press availability asked specifically about Hormuz commercial shipping disruption, the response was a reference to the military posture without engaging the economic question. That gap between the question and the answer is where the most important information lives. There is a historical moment that maps almost precisely onto what we are watching unfold right now, and it is a moment that changed the strategic map of an entire region for a generation. In 1984 and 1985, during the Iran-Iraq War, both Iran and Iraq began attacking neutral commercial tankers transiting the Persian Gulf, a period that became known as the Tanker War. Neither Iran nor Iraq was trying to defeat the other's navy. They were trying to raise the cost of doing business in the Gulf high enough to produce political intervention by external powers. The strategy worked in ways neither side fully anticipated. The United States eventually intervened directly, reflagging Kuwaiti tankers under the American flag and providing naval escort, a commitment that brought the U.S. military into direct armed confrontation with Iranian naval forces in 1988. The tanker war did not end with a military victory by any party. It ended when the economic and military costs of sustaining the conflict exceeded the political will to continue it on all sides. The strategic lesson from that episode is one that every actor in the current crisis has studied. Maritime choke point pressure does not need to be militarily decisive to be strategically effective. It needs only to be economically unbearable. Iran's leadership in 2026 is not the same government that prosecuted the tanker war, but it has read the same history, and the military tools at its disposal for choke point pressure are significantly more sophisticated than what was available in 1984. So where does this leave us for the next 48 hours and beyond? Let me give you 3 clear paths, because this is a situation where the divergence between scenarios matters more than in most crises. Path 1. Managed escalation and diplomatic resolution. This is the scenario in which the extraordinary session of the Supreme National Security Council produced a decision to signal Iran's capability without actually deploying it operationally, and in which back-channel contacts, likely through Oman, which has maintained communication channels with both Washington and Tehran for decades, produce a framework for de-escalation that addresses the underlying issues driving the current tension. This path exists. The channel through Oman is real. It has been used before. Whether it is currently active at the level required to manage this specific crisis is not publicly known. I assess this path as possible, but not probable without a significant change in the political posture of at least one of the main parties. Path 2. Strait of Hormuz commercial disruption. This is the scenario I assess as most likely given the pattern of Iranian behavior and the current economic and strategic logic. Under this path, Iran does not launch a major military offensive. Instead, it conducts a series of actions in or near the Strait of Hormuz: mine laying in shipping lanes, seizures of vessels connected to adversary countries, GPS jamming of commercial navigation systems, and harassment operations by IRGC fast attack craft that raise the practical cost of commercial transit without constituting a clear act of war that would require a decisive military response. This path allows Iran to demonstrate continued operational capability, impose real economic costs, and generate political pressure on the United States and its partners without triggering the response that a direct military strike would produce. It is the smart play. I expect we will see some version of this path. Path 3. Direct military engagement. This is the scenario that everyone fears and that I assess as least likely in the immediate term. but which becomes significantly more probable if either of the other paths fails, if diplomacy collapses entirely, or if commercial disruption tactics produce an escalatory response rather than a political one. A direct military engagement between Iranian forces and U.S. naval assets in the Persian Gulf would be catastrophic in its immediate consequences for the region and potentially for the global economy. The price of oil would reach levels not seen in the modern era. Commercial shipping would halt. The downstream economic effects on fuel costs, freight rates, food prices, manufactured goods would be felt by ordinary people everywhere within weeks. This is the scenario that the actuaries at Lloyd's of London are pricing into their war risk assessments. It is not their base case. It is their risk tail. And the risk tail on this particular event is one that deserves serious attention. Here is what I want you to watch in the next 48 hours. Watch the Lloyd's War Risk Premium announcements. Any significant change in those numbers reflects a change in professional risk assessment by people whose job is to be accurate, not to be reassuring. Watch whether the Omani Foreign Ministry signals any unusual diplomatic activity. Watch whether commercial shipping companies serving the Gulf begin announcing route changes or operational pauses. Those three indicators, insurance markets, Omani diplomacy, and commercial shipping behavior, will tell you more about what is actually happening than any official statement. Tell me in the comments which of these three paths you think is most likely and why. Tell me whether you think the Western media is adequately covering the economic dimension of this crisis, or whether it is focusing almost entirely on the military dimension. That gap matters, and I want to know what you think. We will keep tracking every development in the Persian Gulf and in every related arena, the diplomatic, the economic, and the military dimensions simultaneously. Subscribe now. Share this with everyone in your network who is trying to understand what the next 48 hours might actually produce. Turn on notifications so you do not miss the next update. We will see you in the next one.